A very good morning to all our dear viewers and listeners. You are welcome to ACFIM Talks, this edition. Today, I'm the host, Felix Kafuma, live from our broadcast studio. And with me in the studios, I have someone who needs not much introduction, especially within the field of social political science and academia. Is none other than Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa. Is the university lecturer of Makerere University and is a celebrated scholar. It's good to have you, Professor, and a very good morning to you.
Thank you. Good morning to you, moderator, and good morning to you, all our listeners and viewers out there.
Okay, before we get it started, allow me to first encourage and invite all of you to go on our social media channels and be able to catch this live. Twitter at ACFIM UG, Facebook at ACFIM, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel and should like our YouTube channel page as well, ACFIM Uganda, so you could be able to catch us and be part of this discussion and conversation. Today we are discussing a very interesting topic that is by and large informed by the statements made by His Excellency during his first State of the Nation address that was held at Kolo Independence Grounds on 4th. That was recently. And we all remember that the president alluded to using a new crop of cadres that have come through the wings of NRA, now NRM, to fight corruption. But we'll be coming to that shortly. Before we get into that discussion, I want us to first clearly discuss a number of things that have been happening that are quite critical. One is the budget, which was read yesterday. We have a 44.8 trillion budget, interesting, amidst the effects of the COVID pandemic. And now, I think by now you are aware that Uganda runs a program-based budget as opposed to a sector-based budget, and human capital development took the biggest share of the budget of 17%, standing at 7.7 trillion. Then governance and security came second with 15.6%, which translates into 6.9 trillion allocated, followed by transport and infrastructure at 5.1 trillion, which represents 11.2%. Those were the top three allocations made in those areas. And also we've extensively discussed the tax proposals that government has proposed to raise this revenue and finance this quite ambitious but realistic budget. We will discuss that briefly to pick the views and the thoughts from the professor, but first things first. Until now, the list of ministers proposed to work with Museveni for the next term of office, which is the 6th term, has generated a lot of debate. There are a lot of discussions. People are arguing and having counter arguments on the lineup proposed, especially their specific positions where they have reservations. Especially, I think the biggest surprise was the choice of the prime minister and the choice of the vice president. But also there are a number of other observations I need to take care of. For example, you have for the gender activists, I think we have a cabinet that is relatively quite heavy on women representation. Another observation is the distribution of regions, where we're seeing Eastern region and Western region dominating in terms of where the ministers came from. Probably could there be issues concerning the voting patterns, the choice of appointments, being informed by the voting patterns? I don't know. Probably yes. But also we are seeing more men in the uniform, the army, really now part of the cabinet. Professor, I've been trying to lay the foundation for this discussion, and let me first speak it from the point of the new cabinet. What are your thoughts, especially given the surprise, the hits and misses?
Thank you. As far as the budget is, the cabinet is concerned, did you say cabinet or budget?
The cabinet for now, the list, the proposed list.
The proposed list of the cabinet.
Yes.
First of all, it is bloated. It is a bloated cabinet because constitutionally, the president is allowed to appoint, I think, only 42. 21 cabinet ministers and 21 ministers of state. But there is somewhere a provision which says parliament may allow. But that was supposed to be in exceptional circumstances. Supposing, for example, there is COVID-19 and the president may need to appoint some 1 or 2 ministers to coordinate the fight against COVID-19. But now that exception has been taken to be the normal, and Parliament has now allowed twice more the number, which is not fair. But I think the president wants that big cabinet of more than 80 people or thereabout for cronyism or for political patronage, so that you can appoint certain people for political posts in return for political support. That's what is called political patronage, which has bedeviled the political scene in Africa for some time. A poor country like Uganda, and LDC, it is a least developed country. It has been aspiring to be a middle-income country. It has failed. We have now had the problem of the pandemic. And how do you start appointing that big bloated cabinet? You find in some ministries, there are 5 ministers. This of state, this of that, this of that, yes, without portfolio, and then another one without general duties. And now what is the difference between without portfolio and general duties? And sometimes I don't understand. Minister of National Guidance and the Deputy Minister and the State for National Guidance, what are they guiding us about? Wearing face masks or what? Really, this is a bloated cabinet for just political patronage, just giving out posts. Yes, you can give out posts, but we should also consider that we have to reduce on expenditure. Look at this situation. We have this coronavirus, and we have not even immunized 1 million people. This is a country of 46 million. We have not immunized even 1 million, and we don't have money. We are begging, but we are here increasing cabinet, increasing the parliament. For example, our parliament today is the biggest parliament possibly in the whole world per capita. They don't even know where to sit. I imagine they are going to go for research because they have nowhere to sit. Now, that is one thing. But about the cabinet again, I heard you talk about gender equality or gender balancing. Yes, I think many women have been appointed and they should be appointed to cabinet posts. However, I don't think it should be just a matter of quantitative numbers, just numbers. No, not necessarily so, because so far from my observation, which may be subject to debate, I don't see many of those women who have been appointed to those posts, to cabinet posts, as renowned people in the area of feminism or gender activism. I have not heard of them. Those who are activists in gender balance issues, in feminism, are not there. So merely having people there doesn't necessarily mean that they will fight for women, because who would have wanted to see some ministers drawn, that is women ministers, drawn from the gender activists arena? But that has not been the case. And again, the president told us yesterday that he compared himself to Jesus, and that he appointed the people who are not educated, just fishermen and fisherwomen. And he was very praiseworthy about that. But you see, certain ministries need technical knowledge. Like the Prime Minister is a coordinator of different ministries.
Yes.
He or
Government
she
business.
is government business, but coordinator of ministries, policy implementation,
Yes.
monitoring, implementation. So it needs technical knowledge. Somebody who knows something about policy monitoring, policy evaluation, policy issues. Someone who will go to Parliament and during the MP session, the Prime Minister's questioning time, who can answer the queries from members of Parliament. I don't know, maybe let's give her the benefit of doubt. The Prime Minister designate, I am saying let's give her the benefit of doubt, because I have not heard her many times talk in public affairs, public debates, engaging the general public. But let's hope she will bring in that experience of answering to the satisfaction of the members of Parliament. I don't know about that, but let's give her a benefit of doubt.
Yeah, they have argued that for being a minister, you're just a political head, mainly for policy. And you have below you a team of technocrats who basically do the real work. So looking at what goes into the process is that the Prime Minister is not expected to be very technical in the area, but since he has a team he's working with, and there are those who have argued that probably we are expecting much from that position because of the people who have occupied it before. Are the shoes too big to fill for the Prime Minister? And also, probably also touch the issue concerning the choice of the Vice President. By the way, the women are occupying the position of the Vice President, Prime Minister, First Deputy Prime Minister, and Third Deputy Prime Minister. Those are quite powerful positions, including the Deputy Speaker.
I agree with you. Those are powerful positions. And for purposes of affirmative action, we should encourage that one, so that at least women also are in the limelight, and they encourage the young women also to follow suit. The question is not necessarily occupying public positions of powerful positions, is whether those people also have authority. You may have power without authority.
Yeah, you're right.
The power here we are referring to is the power that is embedded in that position as given by the Constitution and by the laws. But the authority must be from the personality, which might include things like being knowledgeable, being skilled in people management. We need people skills. There is something called people skills, having a good emotional intelligence, because as a Prime Minister or as a speaker or whatever, you need to have emotional intelligence, how to control your emotions and how to study the emotions of others and how to manage them. Two, you need relational intelligence. You need to have good public relations, you need to have good relations, and you need to have communication skills, because you are occupying a very big position. And that position is not only in Parliament, it could also be international relations. That you might be in a conference of Prime Ministers of Africa, and you are given the position, you are given the chair, that this chair is now Uganda. Uganda is now going to chair the Africa Prime Ministers Conference, or the Africa Parliamentary Conference. You need to be somebody who exudes confidence and who can chair an African conference besides chairing Uganda, because you are representing a country and you are in such a high status position. It's not a matter of being a mere fisherman or a fisherwoman.
Without skills. Mm.
You see, yeah, even using that analogy of President Museveni, I know one or two things about Christianity. We know very well that actually the person who helped the spread of Christianity were not necessarily the apostles. It was St. Paul. St. Paul was a learned person. He was a scholar. He was actually a professor. We can call him Professor Paul. He wrote, I don't know how many letters.
3/4 of the New Testament.
Of the New Testament is St. Paul.
Yes.
So it's not a matter of getting a fisherman or a fisherwoman. It's a matter of getting people with technical knowledge, with skills, with competences, with also values and ideology that is aligned to the government in office. Here I am not in any way saying those who have been appointed may not fulfill those conditions. The point I'm making is that so far in the public sphere, in public affairs, in history, we have not seen those people, for example, being gender activists or feminist activists. We have not seen them with such a skills that I was talking about above. But maybe we give them the benefit of doubt. Once they are in office, they will exhume those and they will have confidence. They will be confident enough. But I must say that it seems as if one aspect that informed the president, this is theoretical, it's subject to debate, was that he did not want to provide somebody, with respect to the people who have been appointed, somebody with the potential to succeed him. Somebody with the potential to succeed him that would be given a national profile, national visibility, and already has that potential that people see in him or her. None of those, by the way, apart from maybe Honorable Kadaga,
who is down the ranks.
Who is down the ranks, holds a very big position in the NRM executive. Is a member of SEC.
Yes.
Which means he or she that they have appointed may not be nearer the position of being the chairman of the NRM party. And therefore, the appointing authority may have appointed people who he knows may not have the ambitions to succeed him.
I understand you. I think that line of thought has been held by many in the public, and they were arguing that probably the president was playing his political cards right to kind of like present a cabinet that will not necessarily cause him headache in contesting for the highest position in the land. Anyway, quite interesting discussions. I'll come back to that later on as we try to wind up the discussion to see what should Ugandans expect from this new proposed cabinet, which ideal I think come next week. They should be vetted by Parliament and they start work. But quickly, let's switch to the budget very briefly. What are your takes? I've just been going through the figures of the budget here, and I told you we have a 44.8 trillion budget. The bigger part of this is they expect to raise money domestically. Remember, this budget also has figures, money that goes into financing the domestic debts we have, but also the foreign debts we have. We took a lot of loans. That's understandable. But also the fact that we are spending more in human capital development and governance and security, including transport infrastructure. When you look at the way the first top three allocations are lined up, they also clearly speak to the president's, when he was swearing in, the 4 priority areas he did mention that he would focus on in this next 5 years. So, but what's your take? How feasible is the budget proposals, and can we necessarily, is this, looking at the context which we are operating within, is this budget really realistic?
There are very many issues about the budget. First of all, looking at the background, at the history of the budgeting process in Uganda, is that is the money that has been budgeted and presented to the audience and the public. But there are going to be many supplementary budgets.
Yes.
Now, that is where I could bring in the question of budget corruption, the concept of budget corruption. Supplementary budgets, and normally supplementary budgets is about classified expenditure. We don't know how that expenditure is done. Apart from incidences like we had this corona, which nobody expected, why do we always have supplementary budgets when we do not have certain things like the coronavirus? So we have been given the budget, but at the end of the year, if we go by our history, I can assure you this is not the same budget that we shall be having at the reading of the next budget, because there will have been numerous budgetary supplementary budgets which will distort the whole budget. So our budget in Uganda is largely distorted by supplementary budget, which is almost a given that there will always be supplementary budget. That's one comment. Another comment is, I have heard from you that most of the resources will be mobilized locally. What do we mean? I guess you want to say that some of the resources will be borrowed from Uganda. Is that true?
Of course, domestic borrowing is one of the big concerns when it comes to financing the budget of Uganda, and probably also that explains why even the lending rate of banks has remained high, because government is borrowing from the banks.
But first listen to this. First listen to this, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
If you borrow from the banks in Uganda, how many banks are owned by Ugandans? And how many banks can you call Ugandan? Almost all the banks are foreign.
Yes.
That is also like borrowing from outside.
This guy is borrowing from outside, yes.
This guy is borrowing from outside. And remember, you have the direct borrowing from outside, and then this indirect borrowing from outside also in the banks, from the banks, and you say it is domestic. What domestic is that? That's not true. It is still foreign borrowing, but from the banks that are here but registered outside. That's one. Two, when you borrow from the banks, you are denying the private sector, the private people, from borrowing cheaply or even borrowing, because most of the money now, most of the banks now are lending to government.
Yes.
And leaving the private sector with nothing to borrow, little to borrow, or with high interest rates. That affects the economy. So we need to look at the budget more critically than we have been doing, thinking we are mobilizing funds locally, when actually we are mobilizing funds from outside through the so-called our banks. Which bank? Can anyone tell me out there who is listening which bank is owned by Ugandans, even by
Post Bank, for example?
The Post Bank. Yes. And how much reserves does the Post Bank have as a state bank? The rest are foreign banks located just in Uganda. Now, I have also told you about the budgetary constraints that we normally do have, or the budgetary distortions. You have just mentioned that the human capital development has taken the second, is it the second position or whatever position?
No, it's the highest, 7.7 trillion, standing at 17%. It's the highest. Human capital development.
But we have to disaggregate that human capital development. Yes, I would support human capital development, but here we are talking about education. It's a very big sector, education. When you are talking about education, you are talking about health.
Yeah, they are under that. They are under that program area. Education, health. They are under that.
Yeah. Now, why are we hiding the budget in that bigger concept of human capital development? Why don't we say Ministry of Education has taken this Ministry of Health, has taken this Ministry of ICT, has taken this research and development. Research and development. You see, research has higher returns to development than any other sector that you can think of. We are even talking about agriculture. It is research in agriculture, having new varieties, controlling diseases, controlling soil erosion, controlling this and that, that is likely to bring in higher returns than these NADs and this parish thing you are talking about. So can we disintegrate? Can we make sure that we know how much has gone to human capital development in terms of research and development, and how much has gone to ICT, and how much has gone to innovations, how much has gone to this, so that we understand how. But otherwise, it's a welcome idea that at least human capital development has got a big budget, because human capital development is very central in development of a country. Governance is taking unnecessary big chunks of money.
Yeah,
and that is where we have got the
second one. Yeah, you're right.
That's where we have got this business of bloated cabinet, bloated parliament, bloated presidential advisors, bloated RDCs, bloated this and that. That one needs to be brought down in favor of actually the real human capital development, higher education, research and development, ICT, innovations, so that this country can get out of, can have high-tech, a high-tech country. If I were in the government, or if I were to advise the government, and I was advising government on the indicators or indices of development, or on issues of something to guide us in development, something to achieve, I would say we need to be a high-tech country by 2030, so that we move away from being a country that is always consuming other people's technology. You can see now we are almost going to die of coronavirus and be wiped out because we cannot produce our own vaccine. Not even doing like India, being capable of producing a vaccine that is developed somewhere. It's like India is producing the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is Oxford-based, which was discovered or whatever, maybe in Oxford in UK. But still, we need to have that technological base, technology transfer. How much money have we invested in technology transfer?
Interesting discussions there. It's the issue of prioritization. Governance, and usually the 15.6 trillion percent, which translates into 6.9 trillion, is going into governance and security, and I think that's why it's coming number 2. But now let's now first move away from the budget. I needed to touch something else, and then we kind of like bring it to the real question of discussion for today's talk show. When the president, during the State of Nation address, referred to what he called granddaughters, descendants, actually he called them Descendants Resistance Army, DRA, to take forward the work of the original NRA of their parents, meaning that he argued that these young men and women who have been fathered and mothered by the historicals, by those original NRA, should ideally come forth, take over the administration of most of these government institutions that the president believes collude to engage in all forms of corruption. In fact, let me read this verbatim. He says, corruption has become a real enemy. It starts in finance, where projects are designed with supernumerary elements, which in brackets called extras. These bloated projects go to ministries, then to committees of parliament, and then to the Auditor General, where there is collusion all the way. Meaning the president knows basically the path and the manner in which corruption happens within these institutions. So he's aware of that. But then he goes on to say that what the corrupt fraternity did not factor in their achievement of corruption and criminality was the large number of young people the NRM has trained over the years, many of them coming from the middle class where they do not have the pressure of home poverty. I've been discussing with my children, who are now senior adults, the timeliness of creating the Descendants Resistance Army to take forward the work of the original NRA of the parents, quote unquote. He even goes on to talk about how he approached some of these young men and women to take on some of these assignments, and they were quick to tell him that that is not our passion. He refers to one of those as Miss Irene Kagwa, the one who is managing UCC. And this is where I want us to pick the discussion. How feasible is it to address corruption taking that path Museveni is proposing?
That path that you have just been reading is very unfortunate. With due respect to the president, I don't see the logic of appointing only children of the historicals. First of all, it's an admission that the historicals have been involved in corruption. Mm-hmm. How else have they become richer than most of us? We were here working before them, and they have come, and he has admitted that they have made a lot of money. And that is where we want to know how they made that money. But we know how they made it anyway. We don't have to ask that one. That's a different question. And then to say that you will use a policy of appointing people according to their birth, because of their parents, or because of their economic status, is first of all unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional because the Constitution says there should not be discrimination based on the following, including by birth, including economic foundation. So by that statement, if it was to be followed as stated, that is already, I'm afraid to say, corruption. Because you cannot say that you will appoint people from a discriminatory manner, while still you are going to appoint the children of those who are already rich, and to assume, to make an assumption that the poor are the corrupt.
Yes.
That those who are poor and brought to government will be corrupt. But that when you appoint those sons and daughters of people who are rich, they will not be corrupt. I want to be given a good sounding, logical reason to support that logic, that when the people are rich, they are not corrupt. Really, that goes against the principles, against the knowledge even of bourgeoisie, of capitalism, political economy of capitalism. The more capitalism grows, the more it becomes thirsty for more wealth. To the contrary, he has stood it on its head. So I want to begin to believe President Museveni is a progressive, but then that statement is not progressive, in my opinion. That's not a progressive statement that you employ people of rich. In any case, the people who participated in the NRM struggle for historical reasons were largely from one region, southern region.
Yes.
Eastern, for example, was left out.
Yes.
There are very few people from the east. And we know that Eastern Uganda is the poorest region in Uganda. So we want it to perpetuate the poverty in Eastern Uganda if their sons and daughters are not going to be employed. I hope that statement was made in, he was joking. Let me hope that he was joking, because otherwise you cannot say that you.
I don't think he was joking.
Because that is what is called chronism. Let me put this discussion to this level, by the way, to this Let me recast the discussion.
Okay.
Corruption is not only about bribery and embezzlement. Corruption is wider than that.
Yes.
There is political corruption, there is economic corruption, there is moral corruption. There is grand corruption, there is petty corruption. There is corruption which is called patronage and cronyism. That is also a form of corruption. Nepotism is corruption. Tribalism is corruption, isn't it? Discrimination is corruption. So for you to say that you will discriminate, not this time in affirmative way, because there is the Constitution allowed discrimination, which is called affirmative action. That is discriminating in favor of those who were disadvantaged. But this time, we are discriminating in favor of the advantaged, which is cronyism or patronage.
Which is cronyism, yes.
Which is cronyism. So are we going to promote cronyism? Now, we need to link up the different forms of corruption or types of corruption. If we are going to fight corruption, then we have to fight it from all sides, because they feed into each other. Yes, I know the government has put in place certain institutional framework for fighting corruption. There is a legal framework for fighting corruption. But then, what about the political corruption? For example, we have just been having an election. Rigging elections is corruption, isn't it?
Yes,
Let anybody who is listening to me tell me that rigging elections is not corruption.
It is.
What about the use of money during elections? This is business of vote purchasing. Isn't that corruption?
That's
now, if we have to fight corruption, you have to tackle it from all the dimensions. You have to fight nepotism. You have to fight tribalism. You have to fight influence peddling. You have to fight influence conflict of interest. You have to fight, of course, embezzlement and bribery. I agree. You have to fight patronage, clientelism, and you have also to fight electoral corruption. If you are abusing power in respect of elections, that is corruption.
Yes.
If you did not give space to everybody to participate equally, that would be corruption. So, if you are going to fight corruption politically, then you must first fight political corruption, or you must fight corruption simultaneously. Fight political corruption as much as fight economic corruption, financial corruption. Bureaucratic corruption, which is mainly that embezzlement that the president is talking about through the budgets and the and the audits and all that, that is bureaucratic corruption. But what about political corruption? How will political corruption of election rigging, of using money during elections, of cronyism, of nepotism, of cronyism, of, for example, land grabbing? Isn't land grabbing corruption? Land grabbing. Isn't it corruption?
It is a manifestation of corruption, because by the time you're grabbing
land, corruption. Exactly. What about the question of cutting our forests and destroying our environment? That is also corruption. What about giving some people tax incentives and leaving out others? That is also corruption. So corruption can manifest in different ways. So when we are talking about corruption, and when we are going to tackle corruption, we should give it a broader interpretation. In political science, in social sciences, we first identify typologies. That is types, if you want to put it in a simple way. If you look at the typology of corruption, even the budget can be corruption. You can have corruption within the budget system itself. The ones I was talking about a short while ago. So, is government going to fight corruption? Yes, it has made some steps. As I told you, there are now institutions, even under the president's office, but we have the IGG, we have the police, we have CID, we have
Auditor General.
We have very many of those anti-corruption institutions.
Yes.
And now we have got very good laws about financial management that are supposed to cater for that. So all we need is to implement. But to implement and discourage people from being corrupt, you must first also address political corruption. In my language, in Runyankore, they say, when you steal while you are carrying a baby on your back, you are teaching that baby how to steal when it grows up.
Yes, yes.
So we take it that our political supervisors, our political leaders are the politicians. Now, we now have a parliament. If the parliament starts giving itself a lot of allowances and even exempting themselves from paying taxes as if other people are not working like them, like the former parliament exempted itself from paying taxes on allowances when every other civil servant pays tax even on food allowance, then why do you expect the civil servants not to follow you like the proverbial baby who was on the park? So we need to address corruption from a wider perspective in order to get rid of it, actually minimize it, because we know corruption is in every country all over the world. The only difference is that we have got levels of corruption. These ones have higher, these ones have lower. But in order to minimize corruption, we have to use different dimensions. Can we fight patronage? If you cannot fight patronage, forget about fighting corruption. Because people will see that you are using patronage, you are using cronyism, you are using nepotism, you are using a conflict of interest, you are using all sorts of allowances that you give to the people who are in the government, and they are getting that money legally. The budget allocates them officially. You find somebody is earning 30 million, 40 million, and the other one is earning 400,000. And those who are earning a lot, like members of parliament, are the ones who are exempted from most tax payment on their earnings, when others are equally taxed on such allowances. So when you do that, and you turn around and say you are going to fight corruption, you are not going to manage, because it is going to be systemic. It will be in the system. So can we tackle systemic corruption? Can we look at patronage? Can we look at clientelism? Can we look at nepotism? Can we look at such things and address them? Then when we address them, we shall systemically address the bureaucratic corruption by the bureaucrats. None, I am not saying the bureaucrats are not corrupt, but they need to be given an example from the political side. Let the politicians slash the allowances. Let the politicians be frugal in management of public affairs. Let there be reduced public expenditure on these different, advisors and all these, and unless you reduce and then reduce on the districts and the cities and the constituencies and all these, dividing the country into small and manageable and viable districts and the constituencies. That is also corruption. Corruption should be wider than bribery and embezzlement.
Professor, you really painted this picture very well. And I like that proverb you're saying in Runyankore, because it now brings me to, because I was asking myself this question. These children the Museveni is referring to, the grandchildren that belong to the middle class, these are children who have benefited from the loot made by the historicals, quote unquote. Someone steals money, takes the child to a very good school. So basically, he's stealing money while the child is on the back. So the child is learning that, okay, to make money and access good education, good medical facilities, I must do what the father is doing, what the mother is doing. And now the product of that process is what now the president wants to bring and preside over the running of most of these government institutions in bid fight corruption. The question of whether that is applicable, you've tried to literally explain how laughable this proposal is. But now, here's my question. When it comes to corruption, because you've unpacked corruption, Realistically, if I was to tackle and address corruption, first of all, which type of corruption is Uganda's biggest challenge? And if I was to start to address corruption, where would I first put my efforts? Which button can I touch and others fall? Which symptom can I treat and other symptoms disappear? Because it might be difficult for me to, it's like we are dealing with a virus that keeps changing and mutating. But probably there is that part you can touch and you address the many forms of corruption that probably are manifesting and happening because of there's a problem somewhere. How
you see,
would you...
to tackle corruption, of course, it is an elusive behavior, but you must, because corruption we are talking about is abuse of public office.
Yes.
And therefore, you need accountability. Now, I'm not talking only about financial accountability. I'm talking also about political accountability.
Yes.
There must be transparency, there must be openness, and there must be fairness. Now, to do that, you must fight this cancer, which many people don't understand. I wish there could be a program to teach people patronage. You have to address patronage. In other words, you have to have open government. You must have patronage. One of the characteristics of patronage is that you have certain things on the surface, but underneath you are doing different things.
So you have laws, you have institutions.
Yes.
But below that, there's something contrary.
And you even have people. You have even people in power who don't have actually power. You put them in power of responsibility without power, and then you find somebody below them, far below them, has got more power even to remove them than they themselves can remove that person.
Sounds familiar.
So this question of patronage creates, you cannot hold power that is invisible accountable. You have got that. You have got that invisible or untouchable or non-official power, and you cannot hold it accountable. You can only hold accountable that one which is official, which is on the surface. But this one underneath, through patronage, you can never hold it accountable. So unless we fight corruption and have things openly handled, there is this doing things informally. I think that's the correct word I was looking for.
Yes.
Informal power, informal authority cannot be held accountable. There is that chiechera. The chiechera thing is hidden, is informal, is invisible. Now that invisible, informal power cannot be held accountable.
Are you describing a mafia kind of thing, which people keep referring to?
I don't want to use the mafia. Mafia word is mafiaism is mainly in those Western countries like Italy or Europe or Mexico, whatever. Here it is our traditional homegrown. It is our homegrown informality, patronage, where actual power is not the power you see, but it is the invisible hidden power, which has got more influence than the visible power. And it is this informal way of governing our society that encourages corruption. For example, all those laws we have put in place and systems and institutions, where they are going to arrest some people. And I can assure you they are going to arrest those people who are holding power formally. They will not, they will not arrest. The informal ones, they will not get them. They will not arrest them. They are there. You find somebody holding a position which you are not very sure about what it is supposed to be doing. How will you hold those ones really accountable. There will be handshakes here and there. You cannot hold that one accountable. The handshake is also, it is not in the constitution. There is nothing in the constitution that it is a handshake. You know, there is, we are supposed to have 42 ministers. Now we have appointed extra ministers. How do you hold those accountable?
82. We have 82 now.
The parliament was given a leeway to appoint, to give allowance for the president to appoint some few other ministers in case of emergency. But now, when there is no emergency, we brought the cabinet, we create districts, we create this and that based on political patronage. We appoint people, and then appoint people. Even when they were appointing cabinet ministers, you had new posts being created, the envoys, I don't know, advise on this and that. Why, if all former ministers, why don't we make it formal that every minister who loses a ministerial post becomes an advisor? On which basis are some ministers appointed advisors and others are completely left out? On which basis are we doing that? That is the informality we are talking about. We need to bring formality in governance in Africa, not only in Uganda. Africa is going to lag behind. Africa is going to lag behind, take it from me, unless we address the problem of informality in political governance.
Is it our nurturing the way of doing things? Because why is it that in Europe the formal structures work? Here informality rules the day. Is it the nurturing? Is it the way we brought up? Is it our society?
I do agree with you, it is nurturing, but it's not nature. So let's not think that it is in our nature as Africans to be informal, to have patronage and cronyism and nepotism and all that. There was nepotism in all those countries, but it has been minimized. By the way, the term nepotism comes from nephew. It originated in Italy. Yes.
Interesting.
It originated from Italy when the bishops used to give, because they were not producing, the Roman Catholic bishops, because they were not producing children, they used to give assets and whatever and the resources to their nephews. That is the sons of their sisters. That's where the term nepotism comes from. Wow, I think you can get the etymology of the word nepotism. Yes. So it is nurturing. It is not nature. I agree. And the nurturing is that when in traditional society had not become so complex, and there were not very many public resources. You get me? Now, those attitudes we had in traditional society of helping your nephews and cousins and whatever, because society was less complex and it was in the neighborhood, in your clan or whatever, we have now more or less transplanted it into when we are managing a bigger state. And we have continued with that cronyism and patronage. We need a break. And to have this break, you need a courageous leader, the type of Nyerere. Nyerere was courageous. It was his ideological belief. You remember, do you know that Nyerere never had even a house of his own?
Yes.
This house he got was built by his party after he had retired.
Yeah.
Nyerere used to go to the banks to borrow money to pay fees. He would line up at a bank to borrow money to go and pay school fees. Now, these people that the president characterized as historicals, whom he now admits are no longer poor, because he says their children will not be bothered, will not be encumbered by pressures from poor people. That means they are not poor, their relatives are not poor, their siblings are not poor. Those fellows who are no longer poor now and are the ones now leading us like the proverbial child on the back of the parent. They are the ones now going to lead us, really. We need ideological...
Having learned from their parents.
We need progressive ideological shifting. And we need to have an ideology of serving the public good for the public, the greater good for the public, the greater good for the greater majority. the public good for the greater majority. We need social justice to address some of these things, of these issues fundamentally. But otherwise, it is by nurturing, it is not by nature. Now, if we admit that those people he was referring to are no longer poor, they are no longer bothered, their children will not be encumbered by their siblings because they are well off, young. And you think that child who has been nurtured under that affluence, that child who has seen the amassing of wealth because of political connections, and you expect that child, and you expect that child not to do the same thing. Let's be serious in this country. You expect that person not to do the same thing? We need ideological shift. Short of that, we are going to continue dancing around. We are going to mark time and thinking for how long have we been singing about being a middle-income country? Have we become a middle-income country?
Not yet.
Why?
Not yet.
Because the resources have not been utilized in the right way. We have resources, but they are seamless spread for political patronage, for political buying, for political support buying, and we are not investing in, we are not catering for public investment. I would have seen the budget also concentrating on public investment beyond the infrastructure. I'm not saying the infrastructure is not good, but we need to invest beyond, we need more public investment, and we need to get resources away from governance and all that. And we need to collect taxes in a manner that it is fair. By the way, I don't know whether you and the listeners there know that Uganda lags behind the whole of East Africa in terms of tax collection, in terms of GDP, ratio to GDP. Uganda collects the least of the ratio to GDP. And that does not mean that necessarily that it is a problem of tax administration. It is also a problem of policy. It's a policy question where certain people are exempted. You find somebody constructing a house in Kampala. He has got a property in Kampala of 100 billion. You go and check in the treasury how much that person has paid as tax in terms of tax returns. You look at these buildings in town, owned by individuals. In most developed countries, these big buildings you see in Kampala can never be built by an individual. They are built by companies. But you see a single individual from a very poor family, not long ago, he doesn't have a background of wealth. He constructs a building of 50 billion, and you go to the Revenue Authority, you go to Minister of Finance, in terms of tax returns, he has not paid any tax to talk about. And you say you are fighting corruption. And you say those are by the way, those are the children we are talking about. Those are the children that are going to rule us. Those are the children who did not go to UPE schools. Those are the children who go to international schools. Those are the children who study from abroad. Those are not our children who go to UPE. Those are the children who fall sick and not go to Chirudu. They don't go to Chirudu. They go to South Africa. They are taken to Nairobi. They are taken to Singapore. They are not treated here. They are taken to Germany. They are taken to Washington. So we have now two countries. We have got a country of people who eat commando, and those people whose worry about the evening meal is whether they will eat ribs of goats or they will eat chicken. That is what we do have in this country. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening every day.
Keeps widening,
and that one can only be reversed if we have people in power with the correct ideological thinking. Not progressives. Progressives, please. Not these people who are saying, let's see, put people who have already eaten in positions of responsibility. We need to reverse this country. Otherwise, if we develop two countries of people who are beggars on the streets and those who are in the gorofas, in the high rises, those who are in gated communities, those who are sleeping in gated communities and thinking that they are safe People will find you in those gated communities, or after you have left the gated communities, or before you enter the gated communities. Let's spread the economy to the extent that many people also have access to public resources equitably, so that you don't have those people in gated communities and non-gated communities, those who are driving in penconis, and those who are on Futubishi, and those who are earning 40 million, and those who are earning 40,000, and those who are eating in a Sheraton and Serena and whatever, and those who do not even have a Chikomando in Kareru. And then we say we are stewarding the future. Which future are we stewarding? Of who? The greater majority or the few? We need to have a policy to reduce inequality. If not that, we shall have insecurity in this country, whether we have the military or not.
Wow.
That's my take.
Wow, interesting. We are come to a close of this discussion. It's quite interesting discussion. I think we can continue this discussion on our social media pages. Probably some of those questions will be answered subsequently. But Professor, before you go, there was a question that was raised by Esero Abel, who wanted to know your take on the people the president has talked about. He calls them parasites, who we see are not being apprehended. And it partly touches into what you've just been discussing, how you have a country within a country, how laws, the informalities versus the formality. But as you respond to that question, which is raised, also probably give us your parting shots, because we are way into the time, so that we can bring this to a close.
That concept of that term, that word parasites, is so wide that we cannot catch it. Because whom is he talking about as parasites? He has referred to his ministers as parasites, the MPs as parasites, civil servants as parasites. So everybody he's working with are parasites, and he has appointed those parasites. Because nearly everybody, everybody who is working in the government has been appointed under his regime. I am one of those people who started working when this government had come into power, and I'm retiring. Or I have retired. Then that means all those who are not retired, who are working now, are people appointed under his regime. The regime we are talking about, a system. So who are those parasites? And if we cannot easily catch parasites, it means they are there as informal. That is informality I'm talking about. The formal ones actually are not parasites. Or when they are parasites, the formal ones, they are likely to be arrested by the anti-corruption agencies. Yes, but the informal ones, the informal parasites, whether you have IGG or you have Afande Karema or you have CID or you have the judiciary, you will not manage the informal parasites. If you are not careful, you who are fighting them, the informal parasites will actually kill you. Those informal parasites will actually remove you from that post you are holding. We have got a lot of informal parasites who have been formalized in the governance system that we do have. People with power, enormous power, and yet they are not the formal people. You find somebody is commanding resources, is commanding people pay pilgrimage to him or her, and is in the formal structures not known. Those informal power, those informal people, whether they are the informal parasites, will not be caught because they are informal, they are invisible. How do you catch somebody who is invisible? We have got ghost people. We have got, ghosts are invisible, and you cannot easily catch them. So we have got ghost ministers. Yes, we have got ghost ministers. Ministers who are informal and very powerful. Ghost commanders. Ghost vice presidents. They are there. They are ghost people who are very powerful. And you know them, you who is listening to me, that they are there. And once we continue with that informality, forget about fighting corruption, because corruption is supposed to catch people and hold them accountable when they are in formal positions. But once somebody is a ghost and is informal and you allow that informality to continue happening, and that ghostism continue to operate, and you think you'll catch them. How do you catch somebody who is in a position which is not a formal position?
Wow.
He gives tenders, he allocates land, he gives this and that, and you think you catch him. How do you catch him?
He appoints and fires, yeah.
He appoints and fires, and he's not even elected, and you think you catch
elected, yeah.
And you think you will catch him or her, as long as we have a system of patronage, which in simple terms is informal governance. You will not hold people accountable because they are informal, they are invisible, they are ghosts.
Thank you so much. Well, that is it from Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, who is the university lecturer down at Makerere University, and is a political scientist, is a historian. He's been with us. We've been discussing a number of these topics. We ended with the one of fighting corruption. We began by looking at how the cabinet list, his thoughts on the cabinet list, including also discussing the budget that was just read yesterday. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I want to bring this to a close. My name is Felix Kafuma, who's been the host and moderator of this talk show, ACFIM Talks.
Thank you for hosting me.
Next time, you're welcome. Till next time, bye-bye, take care. Remember to observe the SOPs. COVID is real, so it's about us taking responsibility and try to fight this pandemic. God bless. See you next week. Bye-bye.
The monster of money politics is eating up Uganda's democracy. When you take money from a candidate, it means you are feeding the monster. Then you become a part of the problem. When a candidate who overspends on campaigns is elected, he or she will not represent voters but himself. He or she will engage in corruption to recover campaign money. Social services will not be delivered and the voter will suffer more. Voter, let's be wise. Give democracy a chance. Do not sell your vote. Focus on the issue.